Hey guys, sorry I've been away for a while. I had to drop a new book, The Infinity Affliction. I'll drop a link in the description below if you guys haven't seen it yet. And I've been working on actually 3 new novels at the moment. Go figure. But I really want to keep this series going, so I'm back. We're going to talk more about world building. This time we're going to talk about empires and their equipment, and what that equipment can tell you about their society, and how you can integrate that into your books to low-key inform your readers about things that about the world that they're in. Now, of course, I'm going to be talking about historical examples, but I'm going to be boiling it down. I'm going to be oversimplifying a lot of things because we're not interested in actually getting things historically accurate here. What we're interested in is that subtle arrow that points a reader where you want them to go, where you want their minds to travel. So, don't take anything here as my idea of what history is. I'm going to be exaggerating some things, simplifying some other things, and so forth. But we're going to move on. Now, when you talk about empires and their equipment, the first one you always have to talk about is the Roman Empire. Now, in this case, we're going to specifically look at soldiers and their weapons, and what that weapon can tell you about different things. Before we get to Rome, we're going to talk about some of the warlords, some of the minor empires that were around Rome at the time, and how they looked at weapons. You're going to look at the Gauls, you're going to look at all these different groups, and all of them had weapons that were arguably superior to Rome's. Okay? They had long swords, they had axes, they had weapons that inflicted much more damage. What did Rome have? Rome had the gladius. The gladius is the sword that conquered the world. Now, this is not a gladius, but it's pretty close. Gladius is a 2-edged blade, pointed, it's good to stab, good to slash. Usually a gladius would have more protection for the hand back here. At the time, the original gladiuses were actually probably a good bit heavier than this, and this is not really a lightweight weapon. Is this a great weapon? No, it's not. Not even by the standards of the day. The gladius was not a great sword. If you had to get into a sword fight with somebody and you had to pick a sword, the gladius should not be what you're going to grab. You should be looking to grab something more along the lines of this. It's a katana. And I'm not saying you should grab it because katanas are magical. I'm saying you should grab something like this because it'll got better reach. The reach of a long sword makes it superior to something like a short sword in one-on-one combat. Gladius wasn't designed for one-on-one combat. The gladius was not designed primarily to be a great weapon. It was designed to integrate as part of a weapon system. That's how Romans treated their legion. They gave them the training, they gave them the armor, they gave them the shields, and they gave them the sword that fit the circumstance. Now, a gladius is an acceptable weapon all around. If you have to fight with it one-on-one, you can do that. If you have to hunt with it, or to butcher or whatever, you can do pretty much anything with it. It's not going to be the best at any of them, but it can do the job. Where it excels is when it's integrated into the unit, into the legion. Okay? And in order to get a weapon that properly integrated into their strategy, into their weapon system, they had to sacrifice lethality. They had to sacrifice reach. They had to sacrifice a lot of things in order to get a weapon that made the overall unit more lethal, more mobile, more of everything. And that's an important thing to remember. Around them, they had minor empires who focused on giving their soldiers, their warriors, the best weapon possible, the one that inflicted the most damage, whether that be an axe or a longsword or whatever. And those worked right up until they came until they slammed head on into the Legion. And that focus on a weapon system is a mark of a certain type of empire. It's an empire, and it's the mark of the most successful empires. As another example of this same thing, but taken into a different era, we can fast forward to the 1960s. The American Empire, which is an empire, although it is more of a trade empire than an empire of conquest, was looking for their new weapon. Okay, the weapon they wanted to issue to their soldiers. And what did they focus on? Did they focus on lethality? No. The AR-15 platform is actually far less lethal than your average sporting rifle. You know, a rifle intended for hunting, a civilian's going to get 2, maybe 3 or 4 shots. That's it. He has to resolve the situation in that number of shots or less, which means that every shot counts for a civilian. That's not how the military approach things. The U.S. military in Iraq, last going off, were averaging something like 250,000 shots per enemy kill. 250,000. Okay? In order to properly leverage the AR-15 as it was intended to be used, it requires immense logistical support. And that's the thing with the AR-15, is that it's not a great rifle. It's a good rifle. It can do almost any job, like the Gladius. It can do any job you can expect it to. It's not the best at any of them. But once you integrate it into the weapon system, suddenly everything changes. Okay? The modern day version of the longsword, I would say, is the AK-47, or weapons that follow in that mold. It is a superior weapon to the AR-15 in almost any metric you want to measure, until you go weapon system versus weapon system. And you have to remember that a weapon system includes the soldier, the armor, the training, and the logistical backup. And once you go weapon system versus weapon system, the AR-15 doesn't lose battles. They can lose wars, but they don't lose battles. And that is kind of an underlying hint that you can throw at your readers when you're writing about these sorts of subjects. What kind of society, what kind of empire you're dealing with. If they focus on weapons that are lethal, that are the best of the best, that is often the sign of an empire that is less certain of its position than it might normally be. An empire whose leaders don't necessarily understand the underlying strategies of war. But an empire who sends its soldiers into war with a weapon that might not be the best of the best, but integrates properly with the overall unit, that is an empire that understands how to wage a battle. They may not understand how to wage a war, because that's a whole other thing. The two are not necessarily the same. Waging a battle and waging a war, very different situations. But we can talk about that another time. So these are ways that you can subtly hint to your readers what type of society, what type of military that you're dealing with, and how they might be thinking about things, and how successful they might be in the long run, or how they might have become successful if you're talking about something in the past. So, thoughts for your writing. I'm going to keep trying to get the next episodes up quickly, more often. I am going to be reviewing through the comments, looking for questions. So I'll probably do another Q&A video shortly. If you've got any questions that you want in that, put it down in the comments below. And of course, subscribe, ring the bell, whatever, for notifications. All right, guys. Sorry for this taking so long, but there it is. Another episode in Let's Write a Novel. And now I'm back to writing on my novel.